I'm going to hit record if that's all right. Just, if people can't attend, they can still, be involved.
Okay.
Okay. So, yeah, I mean, for those who read the flyer, I think one of the really cool things about you is that even though you had worked for, as you mentioned, 33 years as this great film professor, you decided to change course pretty late and start writing fantasy novels. So can you talk a little bit about what inspired you to do that?
Yeah, it's kind of a funny story. When Vassar Quarterly interviewed me, they said the beginning sentence is something like, Sarah Kozloff spent 57 years not writing novels, not thinking about writing novels, not wanting to write a novel. And then what happened, this is a true story. Now, authors lie to you all the time. They lie to you just about as much as directors do, but this actually is true. I was sitting in a seminar about American women directors, and we were looking at a list of movies, and it was noting whether or not the movie had passed the Bechdel test. You all know what the Bechdel test is? I can't see everyone's face. Anybody want? No, you look like you know. Okay. Looking through a list, and the Bechdel test is a very low bar. And I looked at the list, and a movie that did not pass was The Lord of the Rings. And The Lord of the Rings was my idol. It was the books when I was a kid, and then the movies later on. It was the work of art that like opened up new worlds to me. And I'm sitting in this seminar, and inside myself, I say, I'm going to write an epic fantasy that passes the Bechdel test. And that was the beginning. Now, of course, it turns out that there are loads of other books that do pass the Bechdel test, but they weren't mine. And at that moment, I didn't know them as well. And so I started writing. And I wrote over the summers, and I wrote over leaves, and I wrote during the semesters, and I wrote 4 books, and then I got an agent, and then I got a publisher, and then they were published. And then I quit Vassar because I had a new second career.
Yeah, no, still kind of incredible to me to think about that. I guess, yeah, I mean, you mentioned it briefly, but I guess one thing I'm really curious about is you were, still working full time at Vassar while you were writing these. Could you talk a little bit about how you managed your work alongside writing 4 full novels?
Well, I found that I really loved the writing. Then there wasn't anything else I wanted to do. So I would start on Sundays, and I would start preparing for the week. And I would teach and grade Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. And then Friday mornings and Saturday were for writing. And I get up early. I know this sounds so foreign to students, but I get up at 6. So I could write until I got hungry, until I got uncomfortable. I would write from 6 to 11, or sometimes from 6 to 1. And that was as much as I had in my head, and it was enough. And so even during the semester, I was writing. And then there's semester breaks and summers and leaves and things like that.
Wow, yeah. I can't imagine that, but hey, that's a strategy.
Well, some of you might get your sort of creative time from 7 to midnight. if you can carve out a block where you feel like you're at your best, that's when, you try and use that block.
Yeah. And I guess continuing off of sort of your work at the school, how would you say your, background working in film like informed your writing in general?
Um, Completely. Never I never took a creative writing class. I never wrote a short story before I wrote these novels. I just had seen so many movies that I had narrative kind of like at my fingertips, in my hair, you know, in my toes, just pouring out of me. I knew the rhythm of how narratives should flow. And I also out and out stole scenes from the movies and put them in the books. So there's a scene that I so love. Have any of you seen either The Seven Samurai or The Magnificent Seven? Well, it's seven mercenaries are hired by these poor farmers to defend them against these outlaws. And it's a suicidal mission. So they have to choose seven people for the band who are really skilled fighters. And in both of the versions, the finding of the fighters is a long sequence, and each of them has to prove what great skilled, what skills they have with knives or bows or whatever. And so I took that whole idea, and there's a long gathering of the raiders in Queen of Raiders because I just liked that whole sequence so much. And then there's a plot point in A Queen in Hiding that comes precisely out of Psycho, where you think that one character is going to be your lead character, and then all of a sudden she gets killed off. And you go, oops. I guess she's not going to be our lead character. I guess someone else is going to be our lead character. So and then I used little things like I took the birds fighting from the birds. I took names of characters from movies or names of actors, names of screenwriters, and just put them in the book. It's my own sort of game after a while.
I'm sort of when you mention the whole Seven Samurai inspiration, I'm sort of thinking of like the setup to a heist movie, how you
Yeah,
have, we got to get the squad, go to this really specific thing.
right. We need the safecracker, we need the driver, we need the
Hmm.
impersonator, right? Heist movies do that same thing. It's just that Seven Samurai is 54. It did it best and early on.
I'll take your word for it. Um, yeah. So I guess next, so how did you go about crafting a world for these novels?
That came through layering. I've gathered from being in the field that a lot of people create the world first and then they figure out what would happen in this world. I just was sort of, generic, pre-electricity, let's have horses. But then, as I went along, every different country has a different kind of bed, and every different country has a different religion, and every different country has a different kind of industry and a different group of prayers and a different color hair. And so, I would start with a couple of those things. I actually think the religion and the hair color were the first, and the other things just started adding on. And then I worked with a Vassar geology student who was the intern for the cartography lab, and Penelope started drawing maps. And so it was kind of a back and forth between Penelope would draw the map and then I would use it in my world. And then I'd go back to her and say, oh no, this city needs to be on a river. So that really helped me create the world's sort of solidity. If you want to, if you go to my website, which is sarahkozloff.com, and you go to novels, you can see the map. It's there right now. I put it up because some people were getting audiobooks and they didn't have the map. And I think the map is important because people are moving around a lot.
That actually, that's a really wonderful anecdote, and that actually reminds me of when I last saw you speak about a year ago now. How you talked a little bit about. This wasn't a question I was initially going to ask, but you talked a little bit about like getting advice from your colleagues and like in different departments too, which I thought was really interesting.
Oh, that was the most fun. I don't see how any writer could write without being part of a college community. Because I would send not even people who were like my best friends, just people I knew who were in different departments. John Long, what kind of marine animal can carry a woman on its back? And because this was the most interesting question he got all day, he'd get back to me that day. And then two professors from physics had an argument with each other because I'd asked them, if you're on a hill and you're watching for boats coming, how many miles out is it before you can see the mass of this is a curvature of the earth and geometry problem, right? And so they both did it their own ways and they were arguing with each other. It didn't really matter. I just wanted a ballpark. But Robert Brigham in the history department, he actually couldn't help me with pseudo-medieval swords and fighting, but he sent me to a colleague of his at West Point. So I had my own colonel. And he was so generous with his time. He liked fantasy books. He liked, so every time I wrote a battle scene, I would send it to him and say, is this plausible? Is this how it would happen? And sometimes he'd say no. And sometimes he'd say yes. And he gave me a lot of great ideas about these sort of barricades you would put at the end of a road so that people would have to turn around and go backwards. He was a great help.
Wow. I had no idea you even had that much outreach.
Well, it was a little hard for me because I'm a little bit shy of talking to people I don't know. And just suddenly just call this colonel and say, will you be my advisor, right? But sometimes you can, people are nice. Sometimes they aren't.
Absolutely. So I guess then you've already talked a little bit about like how some of your inspiration comes from film, but if you have any other sources, it'd be great if you could share that. And I also wanted to ask how you might deal with like burnout or writer's block.
Other sources. I mean, I've already said that Lord of the Rings was really important to me. How many of you have you all seen the movies? Yeah. Have any of you read the books? So, and specifically, there's a poem in Lord of the Rings about all that is gold and does not glitter. It's Bilbo's poem about Aragorn. And that was really the seed of my story, because the queen goes into hiding. So she's not, she's pretending to be a peasant girl, a woodsman girl. She does not glitter anymore. And that was really the inspiration. Burnout is a funny question to me because I don't think I've ever had writers the classic writer's block. Um, there were times over the pandemic when I just, I didn't feel like doing anything. I mean, it wasn't like I don't feel like writing. It was like, what's the point of this whole life, you know? And I would just be lying on the couch feeling pandemicked out, um, and didn't make much progress. But I write when I want to write, and I write because I want to write. So there's very little working against some kind of barrier. Those days I couldn't get up off the couch. Okay, I didn't get up off the couch. It's all right. The next day I wrote 20 pages. I think writer's block comes a lot for to people who have deadlines. And one thing about the way I was doing this was there was no deadline. Nobody knew I was writing, except for the people who were answering my crazy questions. Nobody knew I started writing this fantasy series. There was no deadline. It was just something I was secretly doing down here in my office.
Yeah. I mean, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, especially, I know, pandemic has made it a lot harder for a lot of us to work on things, but yeah, definitely how you mentioned not having deadlines must help. But and maybe I'm getting a little ahead of myself, but when we were calling, you did mention you've been working a little bit on the next project.
Yeah,
Um,
I'll tell you about that in a minute.
okay.
Okay.
I did want to ask if there are, deadlines for that, and no. So this is just your general style.
I'm in a, as I've moved a little bit, toes into the writers community, I realize that I'm in a very rare position. Most people are much younger. Most people, this is their career. They're very ambitious. I've already had a career. I was a full professor. So I'm doing this for the love of it. And that takes a lot of the pressure off. I think writer's block comes from, oh my God, I got to get this in by next June. You take yourself out. It's particularly with papers. Papers are not fun to write, but they have to be in by midnight, or your wicked teacher will, dock you grades.
Yeah, I'm not much of a novel writer, but I can certainly relate to the paper bit.
I thought you guys could. Okay.
Yeah. So I guess another question, based on the last time I saw you talk, you brought up a little bit about how your protagonist, Cerulia, is a little different from other female protagonists. Could you elaborate a little bit on what you mean by
Sure.
that?
And I'd love to hear your guys' experience reading other novels or watching films. But one of the things that's happened in the last 20 years is that when people want to be feminist and progressive, they create these kick-ass heroines, right? She's tougher than everybody else. She's Wonder Woman. She's Kill Bill. She's got her knives and she's going to kill everybody. Um, that did not appeal to me. I First of all, I don't sort of believe in casual violence. Second of all, I don't think that that's necessary to be a heroine. So Cerulia had to have other strengths, like being smart, persevering, um, being able to be a good actress and go put herself in disguise. Those kinds of qualities, right? Being more clever than the people who were after her, not necessarily being the wickedest killer of them all. And so actually I'll give by book 3 and 4, she does take some lives. But it's not this like casual, oh, you're dead, you're dead, you're dead, you're dead, bodies littered around across the screen. It's much more wrenching, and there's much more stopping over the morality of was she right? Was she justified in doing this? Was, you know, just because she's the heroine and the queen, is she right to kill this person? So you have to read book 3 to figure that one out.
Yeah, that's an approach I really appreciate hearing about. And yeah, once I get there myself, I'm very curious. I mean, you know, I think you sort of tackled this question to some degree, but so we can feel free to move on. But I guess playing off of that, what do you think about when sort of considering just representation as a whole in your works?
I think it's very important that authors do their best to include broad representation, but it's quite tricky, because if you are a white woman, how can you speak for other ethnicities? If you are heterosexual, how can you speak for people who are bi or gay or trans? So you have to approach these topics with sensitivity. I do believe in sensitivity readers who tell you, for Beam of Life, I had a sensitivity reader who caught some things that I was just totally blind to. Not that it's completely politically correct now, but it's better than it was, right? Because we all have our ingrained fallback things. So, I mean, one of the easiest things to do with classical Hollywood is to look at how sexist, homophobic, racist, anti-Italian, anti-whatever it is. I mean, it just shouts at you from the screen. And you don't want to replicate those lazy habits.
Very nice. And I guess last question before I let you do your thing. What advice do you have for students who might be looking to become writers?
Well, I would say you have to want to become a writer for the right reason, which is not because you think that it's a way to fame and riches and celebrity, and because it's not. They did, publishers associations have figured out that most writers earn about $600 a year. There are the superstars like, Steve King or John Grisham or George R.R. Martin. And then there's everybody else. And it averages out very low. Many people can't find agents. Many people have to independent publish. So I believe you have to want to write because you enjoy the writing. That there's nothing else you'd rather be doing from 7 to 12 at night. You wouldn't rather be in the hall talking with your friends. You'd rather be in front of your computer making up characters and having them act in your fictional world.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's all my questions. I know you had mentioned you had stuff you wanted to talk about, so go right ahead.
Well, I want to go on with, last time I tried to do this, I disconnected. So if I disconnect, I was trying to share my screen, okay? So if I disconnect, I'll call you right back.
Oh, I think I have to enable that. Give me 1 second.
Okay. You can tell I have not been teaching at Vassar this year. I am not as computer adept as your teachers this year. And in fact, Connor and Harrison, I'm a co-host now. Connor and Harrison can testify that I was losing computer adeptness even in my live days. I was having trouble with the Crestron and things like that. but you've seen worse. Okay, I'm going to try and show you this little PowerPoint that I made up just for you guys. Wait a minute, I don't want presenter view, which I want you to do slideshow. Tell me if you see it. Are you there?
We're here. I don't think we see it yet.
Oops, it's on my screen. So maybe I have, it says share screen down here. And then hold shift to select multiple windows. I don't want multiple windows. I just want this one. Do you see creation over time, over a long time?
We've got it.
Yep, yep.
Okay. Please keep talking to me because otherwise I'll think I've lost you. And I'll do slideshow. No, I don't want that one because then you can see the other stuff, right? There's just this one. Okay. Okay. So I could tell from what Connor was saying that what really interested him was how did I do this over 7 years and teaching? And I wanted you guys to know that it's not so unusual. For instance, my hero, J.R.R. Tolkien, he started daydreaming about Middle-earth at age 5. He published The Hobbit in 1937, and then he wrote the trilogy over 12 years while being a father, while teaching at Oxford, and pausing during that time for 4 years completely. And then it was finally published in 1954. So he makes my time period look like, you know, a blink of an eye. There are also artists. The sculptor Auguste Rodin worked for 37 years on this sculpture called The Gates of Hell, sculpting every little one of these things. It was inspired by Dante's Divine Comedy. And then I just read this in the New York Times 2 days ago, and it made me sort of want to cry. This is a woman scientist named Katy Carrico, and she was working on mRNA for 40 years as an academic. She never made over $60,000 a year. She was a lowly sort of research assistant. She ended up doing the basic science. That's the groundwork for Pfizer and Moderna. And they asked her how she was feeling, working so hard all this time. And she said she lives for the bench, the spot in the lab where she works. She cares little for fame. The bench is there, the science is good. Who cares? Working over a long time is possible if you go into a state that I've been describing, but I don't know if you guys have been there yet. It's called flow. I'm not making this up. It's an actual recognized phenomenon by psychologists. And flow is when you're so immersed in what you're doing that you lose your sense of time and place. You're not looking at your watch. You're not looking at the time. You're not thinking, when can I stop working on this paper? You're just there. If you're building a video game, you're just in your game. If you're painting, you're just in your painting. If you're writing, there's a loss of awareness of self. This scholar studied the creative process and found that when the artist was in the course of flow, they would persist at their task relentlessly, regardless of hunger or fatigue. They would lose interest after the project was completed, highlighting the importance of the process and not the end result. So if you want to write, or if you want to be a choreographer, or you want to write screenplays, you have to love the process, because you can't control what's going to happen with the end result. The only thing you can control is how you feel about being in front of the computer. It's from Psychology Today. Whoops, come back here. Come back here. So I wrote the 9 realms. Whoops. Come back here. And it is 4 books. And at first they promised me, darn it. Why is this?
Oh, you're right clicking. You've got to use the left instead.
There we go. At first they promised me that this was going to be an image of the fountain, which you're introduced to in the first book. But I think that was too complicated because the books are not quite the same thickness, and the crown was easier to lay out. So it's about 2,000 pages. And it really is a whole work, so that I could end book 1 or book 2 or book 3 on a cliffhanger, because the books came out 1 a month. January, February, March, and April of last year. And no books come out like that. So a lot of people are told, no, you can never write a cliffhanger because that's not fair to your readers. Then you leave them hanging for 18 months. Well, I'm not leaving you hanging for 18 months. I'm leaving you hanging for 3 weeks. Or I'm not leaving you hanging at all because it's all done now. So the other thing was, since I wrote it all before any of it was published, I had ideas when I got to the Cerulean Queen that I could go back and put into A Queen in Hiding, that I could seed and foreshadow, even though I hadn't thought of them until I was in book 4. So can you see all of this, or do you see, sorry guys, do you see what I see, which is your pictures here on the right side of the screen? You don't see
We don't see our own pictures now.
Okay, good. So I started writing in the summer of 2013. I had full drafts by 2017. I sold it to Tor in 2018. And then I revised. And you know that writing is all revision. I checked, I was using this writing program called Scrivener, and it tells you how many times you've opened a given file. And in one file in book 2, I had opened it 69 times. So it's not a question of first draft, second draft, third draft, fourth draft. It's really a question of 69 drafts. And then it was published. And then, as some of you know, I was all excited. Vassar and Tor had gotten together and set up this book tour for me. And I was going to Vassar clubs around the country. And I was in San Francisco at the San Francisco Vassar Club. And I got the call that all the bookstores were closing down, that the book tour was halted, that everything was being, rolled up. And that was just before I was been on my way to, there are these, been in sci-fi and fantasy, there are these big cons. Some of them, people dress up like Star Trek characters or 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 Star Wars characters or Harry Potter characters. Anyway, I was on my way to my first big con, which is called Emerald City Con in Seattle. Didn't get there. Didn't get to the one in New York, didn't get to the one in Maryland. The whole thing went. So this is why I spent some of the pandemic just lying on the couch. But, you know, a lot of people got slammed by the pandemic one way or another. So I had been, even before the book came out, because there was a lot of time when the book was in the hands of the publisher, they have to copy edit it, they have to design the typeface, they have to design the covers, and there wasn't anything for me to do. So I started writing because I like to write. And so I started a new book, and it's called Beam of Life. It's about, this is a projector beam. It's about fairies that are born in a projector beam starting in 1918 and going up to 2012. And these little fairies, they take their sort of personality from the movies. So there's fairies like Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers. And two of my fairies are like the droids from Star Wars. And I just, one of them, he's called DF1 and the other one's called CP0. And CP0 is very rotund and keeps crashing into things. Anyway, I just finished my 69th revision of Beam of Life and sent it to my agent last week, which is partly why I have time and space in my head to be with you today. So let's see if I can get back to you. Here I am. Are you still there?
Yep.
Do I have to stop sharing screen?
Yep, I can take care of that actually.
Good. Excellent. Okay, now I'm up for whatever you guys want. I can just answer all your questions with lies, or if we run out of questions, I do have an 8-minute excerpt from book 3 that's kind of fun to read. So why don't we take the questions first, and then if it's slowing down, I'll read you a little bit so you get a taste.
Absolutely. Thank you for that presentation. And yeah, start asking away, people.
Liv.
I want to ask, I'm a big fantasy fan, read a lot of fantasy novels and epic fantasy. And because that genre seems to be so popular, and also often, recently I found that there's a lot of popular, I guess, more feministy fantasy novels. How did you, was it important to you to kind of create a more unique narrative? And just in general with fantasy writing, do you find it hard to kind of come up with a new story because there's been so many done?
Yeah, I think that that actually, you remember I started this in 2013, and at that time there weren't quite as many, right? But epic fantasy is generally, not always, but generally a quest type story, right? Or restoration type story like mine is. And by the time this came out, some people were saying, well, it's really well done. I really like the characters, but it's not breaking incredible new ground. And I think they're right. It was just my epic fantasy. And it's part of the reason why I turned to Beam of Life, which has never been done and no one else could do it because I was the only one who had that knowledge, right? but so the people have called it a traditional epic fantasy in modern guise, and that's what it is. Which writers do you like?
Well, I'm a big Brandon Sanderson fan, which, yeah. So, and right now I'm reading a great book called Children of Blood and Bone, which is a very popular fantasy novel right now, with some great female characters. So that's, it's very exciting.
Yeah, they are, all of them very exciting and so readable, and such an escape from whatever this world is throwing at us.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much.
It looks like Emma has a question. She's raising her hand through Zoom.
Hi, Emma.
Hi. So I've done my bit of writing here and there, and when I'm drafting and not even outlining, but just like giving myself the general idea for either a short story or an extended thing or a fic, what is the difference for, like, how do you differentiate between taking because you mentioned this earlier, how do you differentiate between taking inspiration from an existing work and crossing that border into oh darn, am I copying territory?
Well, there is a whole category which is called fan fiction, where you take the same characters and you just write a new story about them. And people do that a lot for Star Trek and Star Wars, and in Star Trek
yeah, I'm familiar. I'm familiar with AO3. I've made my presence on there.
Create all these strange romances. I think that if the characters are yours, it doesn't matter that you're inspired by some plot moves. There are only so many plot moves possible to create, but they can be created in different orders and highlighted in different ways. So if the characters are unique to your conceptions, and if there's things about the narrative world that are unique to your conceptions, I don't think, how many love stories have there been? Nobody says, oh, you're stealing from me the idea of a love story, right? Or a heist story. That's just genre. So that's where I would put my originality, is in the characters in the world. Does that help at all?
It totally does. Thank you. I'm very much a character-driven person. So that
there must be
feels
something
good to know that if I put stock in how I write my characters, which I always do, like that's another thing, is I tend to write my characters more so like my plots tend to center around my characters rather than characters centering around plot, if that makes any sense. So like, yeah, that feels good.
I enjoy that kind of writing. I don't enjoy the writing like that's just about action. So there you go.
Thank you.
It looks like Antonio has a question.
I raised my real person have. First of all, congratulations on finishing your second book. Second of all, I was just wondering, I've been hoarding questions for a while, but I'm going to start off with,
okay.
Are there any, you're a film major, and you say that your film is, all your experience watching films has honed your storytelling senses. Are there any films in particular you would recommend to any sort of aspiring writer?
Oh goodness, I like that question. Okay, I would recommend films. We're all sort of indoctrinated in a straight Hollywood style. And if you take a writing class, it's going to talk to you about initiating action and building to a climax and then reaching a status. So I would recommend some films that mess with that paradigm. One of them is Citizen Kane. which has a really unique narrative style. Another is, The Seven Samurai, which is a great Japanese film. It's long, and yet, I mean, it's 4 hours long, and yet you're not restless for a moment. And 8½, which is by Fellini, and is written in short, it's sort of like an anthology of short stories. But then at the end, the worlds mix and come together in a full circle in such a satisfying way. Okay, what other questions did you have?
Oh, Isabella has a question.
Oh, I thought Antonio. Oh, we'll come back to Antonio.
Oh, I'm sorry.
A lot. So, but first we'll go to Isabella, and then we'll come back to Antonio.
Oh, Antonio, you can go if you have a burning question. Or okay. I was just having a conversation with a friend the other day about like the portrayal of villains and also the like hero-villain binary that is in everything really, but especially in fantasy. And like, how would you say you've worked, or what is your philosophy on writing heroes and villains that kind of complicates, you know, the really simplistic idea that we have of those?
Yeah, that's a good question. And it also comes from what I know about film. There's a great French filmmaker named Jean Renoir who said, everyone has his reasons. And so with every character, they don't think they're the villain. They think that he thinks that what he's doing is right. He thinks he's going to save his country. So with there's several different villains. With each of my villains, I was like, well, let's show his good points. Let's show how he believes he's doing the right thing. And with one of my villains, I wanted the readers to believe that up until the end, he might change sides and realize he was wrong and solve everything. Spoiler, he doesn't. But there was that possibility there. Yeah, I wanted you to see that possibility the whole time. And then with one of my villains, he was just a straight sociopath. I mean, they're out there in the world. We know they're out there. But what's a little interesting about Matwick as a sociopath is that he knows he's a sociopath, and he envies people who have real feelings. And he goes to the theater to watch actors, and if it's a really good performance, he'll cry, or he'll get, it says, is this what it means to have pity? Is this what it means to have grief? So even in his psychotic damage, I was trying to give him moments of yearning to be normal. There's no hero who is totally heroic in my whole 2,000 pages. It's too easy to give them my flaws. They all have flaws. And they come out in different ways at different times, and they don't just go away. And they're not just conquered as you go through your character arc. They're still there. So the more you can think about how everyone has his reasons, the less one-dimensional your villains and heroes will be. Does that help?
Oh, how about Lena, then Antonio?
Hi.
Hi.
I've written some like longer form stuff, but I'm like a little uncertain. I'm not actually even sure if this is a super question, but
There are no questions.
well, I'm not sure if it is a question. But like, I guess, how do you find like the motivation to create like a series? Because I've created some things that are just like one-offs, but I don't really know how to like sustain something.
Well, you might be a short story writer. In fact, in sci-fi, I think there are more short story writers than series writers. There are a lot of people who write 60 short stories and they win prizes and they're put in anthologies. I myself can't imagine writing a short story. I always want to go long. I want more years. I want to know the backstory. I want to know what her grandmother was like. So it's a different sensibility. Whether you feel like, oh, I just have this scene, this situation to tell, or I want something that stretches. But keep with the short stories because they are easier. If that's your form, they're easier to sell and place.
Well, it's like I have like Connor can attest. I have like a like I've written long things. I just don't really like know if I have more than one book in that specific place in me.
You may or you may not. You'll find out. I'm sorry, but how old are you?
20.
You'll find out. I mean, there are some advantages. I'm 64. Nothing is set about your writing life at 20. And in fact, Tor has asked me to come back to the Nine Realms and continue the story. And I have some ideas about how it could be continued. But that's nice because it means that they've invested in that world and they believe it will have fans that will continue. Connor, where are we?
Oh, we're doing pretty well. It's about 2.
Okay.
I think we had a question from Antonio on the docket.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm unfortunately also very pressed for time, so I'll need to dip soon. But I do have time to ask one last question about. So you mentioned that while you were still a professor, you would budget Friday mornings and Saturdays to writing. Do you still do that now that your main job is writing, or do you just sort of?
So now I'm retired. I can write whenever I want. I still do write in the mornings. With that first cup of coffee, my head is clearest. I'm most motivated. So very rarely will come back to the computer in the afternoon or evening. But if something's going on, if I need to take the puppy to the vet, if I need to go get new glasses and I can't write that morning, oh well, I'll write tomorrow.
Yeah, that must be pretty relaxing. Oh, Rowan, you have a question.
Yeah, this isn't so much about the process of writing. I don't know. I'm not enough of a writer to like have formed questions. I think I just listen to what other people say and try and like glean something from that. But what are you, or apologies, are you envisioning beam of light to be another series, or is that more just like
Beam
a
of Life
standalone?
is a standalone.
Okay, all right.
But as I said, I tend to go broad. So one of the reasons why Beam of Life took 2 years and it's only standalone is because at first I wrote all these different chapters from different characters' point of view. And my agent said, "You're losing us here." And I had to go back and cut out all the points of view of all the different characters. And, I'd had all these subplots of this sad romance, and I had to go because in a standalone, you don't have room for every character's whole life.
Thank you.
Thanks for asking.
Interesting. It almost sounds a little like Midsummer Night's Dream-esque in that sense.
It is. Shakespeare is a big influence on Beam of Life. Antonio's still there, or is he saying goodbye, or is he asking a question? Oh, he's saying goodbye. Bye. Okay.
Yeah, does anybody else have any questions? Because if not, I actually have one to run with. I know I've asked you. Okay, so I'll take point.
Okay.
I've asked you plenty personally, so I'm fine there. But I actually have a question from my mom, who's read your series and loves the books.
Okay.
He wants to know if you have any favorite characters and why.
Okay. Tell her my favorite character is Stalia. Stalia is the foster mother of the princess. People think that I believe I am the princess. I do not believe I am the princess. I do not have magical abilities. I'm not going to be a queen, all these kinds of things. Stalia is a slightly cranky mother who chides her children, but also has an artistic side. She's a weaver, and she weaves together different strands. And so I thought she was my author surrogate, weaving together all the different storylines in the book. But there's a really funny moment. You have to get to the end of book 3 when people are in terrible peril. And Stalia says, "Oh, I've got to remember this image forever. It's going to be my best tapestry." Because that's the way she looks at things.
That's a wonderful answer. Thank you. I'll be sure to let her know.
Okay. Other questions? Can I ask you guys a favor? Maybe because of the pandemic, not all the libraries that I would think would want the 9 Realms have picked it up. So you're all from different hometowns, and your hometown library will have a "what book would you like us to order" page on their website. And that would be a great way to get more copies out in the world in different locations, right? And get new readers. But tell them they have to buy the paperback, because otherwise you don't see the map and you don't have the glossary, and because they tend to cheap out and just buy the ebook.
Will do. Thank you.
Thank you.
Do you want me to suggest the whole series? Because it's suggesting a one.
You can see what can you say do the whole series? Oh, you're already there? You guys are so.
Oh yeah, I worked at this library for a while. Okay. I know the page.
Okay. Yeah, suggest the whole series.
Yeah, okay. Because give me.
Okay. You can find the ISBN and everything. And anybody, you know, if Antonio and the people who had to leave could do that too, that would be just really so helpful to someone who's who missed all those sales in the pandemic. Do you guys want me to? I have this one chapter I love to read. It's my favorite chapter. It is not representative of the rest of the series. You'll see why, because it's got all these animals in it, and it's the only chapter like this, but it's 8 minutes long. Do you have the time? Are you interested? Yes, show of thumbs.
I think we do.
Okay. So let me see if I can pull up the, you still see me? Am I still here? Okay, 8 minutes long, In the Sea. Okay, this is the beginning of book 3. And all you need to know about the story right now is that Cerulia, the main character, the princess, she's been hit by a fireball and fallen into a moat, a grimy, dark colored moat. So nobody even sees that she's underwater. And she just seems to have disappeared. So this is how it goes. In the sea, billions of minnows lived and died without knowing anything about the spirit of the sea. Lawton didn't hold dominion over all sea life, just the biggest and oldest creatures in his realm, such as the black terrapins that lived in the Femturin estuary. These enormous terrapins had inhabited this salt marsh for centuries. Barnacles crusted their shells, their black curved claws stretched as long as human fingers. The eldest of them all, with beady eyes and a patterned shell as big and round as a carriage wheel, waded in the murky depths of the moat the morning of the conflagration in Femturin. Of course, it was impossible that he could have known what was going to transpire, that a fireball would hit Cerulia and she would fall off her horse into water at exactly this spot. A gnarled, ugly old turtle. He could not possibly foresee the future. Whoops, come back here. Having trouble with my mouse or my mouse skills. Maybe I have it upside down. Hold on. Nevertheless, he waded in the murk. The instant she plummeted into the brackish water, he pushed off with his strong back flippers, catching her steaming body on his hard shell. He swiftly bore her away underwater, hidden from sight, so that in less than a minute they swam out of the moat proper and into the salt bay. Once he reached the edge of the open water, he rose in the high grasses of the swamp to give the human a chance to breathe. He kept his shell above the surface, making the reeds part with his 4 flippers. After 2 hours, the eldest reached the ocean proper, where the sand bottom fell further away and gradually cleared of plant life. This was not his territory. The cold currents and the waves moved with a force that made him uncomfortable. The weight on his shell had long become burdensome. He yearned for his warm habitat. But he was old. He knew patience. A small group of sea lions approached with their noisy commotion, sending ripples through the water. "Ert, ert, 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 ert," they hailed the eldest. He was relieved they had finally arrived. When the terrapins submerged, the human let go. She floated loosely on the surface while a fat sea lion dove underneath and took over as the human's flotation support. His own part played, the eldest headed back to his mud. Sea lions prefer to swim in arches, diving and rising. To them, swimming the sea's surface, keeping their backs in the air, feels unnatural and awkward, and their black, slippery bodies provided no purchase for the human, nothing whatsoever for her to hold on to. "She's slipping right off, Blubberpuss," said one juvenile female to another. "Look out, there she goes." "Thou gripest, thou take her." "Okay, I'll take her next. See, Blubberbutt, thou gotta keep thy back flat, and thou gotta kink thy head a bit and make a little wrinkle round thy neck, a handhold. See, she grabbed on. Wager she won't stay long." Though sea lions prefer to hover near their feeding grounds along the coastlines, this group swam deeper into the ocean. The human lost strength in her fingers and slid off to the side again. This time she didn't float, but rather plunged into the colder depths. She didn't struggle, and only a tiny trickle of bubbles surfaced. The eldest female barked in alarm. "Swim beneath the creature," she ordered one of the adult females. "Lift her up." The human made strange choking noises when the sea lion got her back up into the air. "Don't drown me," the human sent. "Not our fault, human. It's bad enough to have to stay on the surface for such a queer, misshapen thing as thee. Hey, don't grab at one's whiskers." Something had scorched the human skin. The sun burned it further, and instead of providing relief, the night seawater scalded her again with its harsh salt and icy cold. "Burning," she sent to the sea lion. "Don't tell one thy troubles. One sought to occupy and couldn't dive to catch them because thou needest air. One's hungry. One has already raised a pup for the year. No one asked for thee." The stars had come out by the time the group of sea lions rendezvoused with a school of dolphins. The dolphins chattered in greeting. "Where hast thou been, thou stuck-up big mouths? Did thou get lost? Did thou stop to chow down? Take this burden off our backs," ordered the leading sea lion. "Your Majesty, we are here." "Never mind all the chatter. Got the burden?" The sea lion swam off, barking with relief, and then dived deep, luxuriating in their freedom. "We have thee now," cried the dolphins. "Thou art safe. Dost thou hear us? We will never let thee breathe water. We like air too. We suck it in and blow bubbles with it. Sweet sea air." The human made no reply, but she still had life. "Thou art injured, your Majesty. We will take thee to help. No more fear, no more worries. We are the best. Loughton loves us the most because we are the swiftest and the smartest." A few times she woke up enough to retch out a gob of seawater. "Well done, Majesty," said the dolphin who was carrying her. "Help me, dolphin," she sent. "I will surely die without help." "We know how to help thee, little Majesty, and we're happy to do it. We apologize for the rudeness of the whiskered, flat-faced ones. They have no brains. We call them shark fodder, though not when they're about." "What a great adventure we are having. Shall we go a bit faster? Wouldst thou like to try some leaps? Flying is the most fun." She grabbed onto her dorsal fin for a few minutes, but then her grip went slack. "Never mind, little Majesty. Thou canst rest. The water is as still as glass tonight. We will ferry thee over rocks and chasms, coral and seaweed, crabs and jellyfish. Some flying fish bounce beside us. Our ripples barely foam. The moons hung low in the sky, watching us, making their friendly shimmer glimmer. Perhaps they smile through that little veil of clouds. Hark, a pod of whales have joined us. They don't compete with us for fish because they eat only krill and shrimp. Isn't it strange to grow so big, eating only the tiniest food? Truly, Loughton has the most magnificent creatures. One wonders why they have come. We are better at ferrying thee. Thou couldst fall off their backs, and the whales wouldn't even know it. Don't tell them, but they are a wee bit stupid. Oh, the whales have come to sing thee a lullaby. Isn't that nice? They love to sing, though not all creatures can hear them. A dozen massive shapes surrounded the school of dolphins. The females sang their baby calf comfort songs in tandem with long repeats. The moonlit water reverberated with their kind intention as it washed over the human, barely clinging to life. Mother is here, sweet little calf. Stay close to me, swim near to me in the gray-green deeps. My tail is strong, my milk is warm. Your aunts will watch, so no harm befalls thee. Beloved of Lotan, spirit of the sea, beloved of Lotan, both thee and me. That's it.
Thank you for that. It was interesting for me to listen to because it was very different from the excerpt you read last time.
Yes, completely different, which is fun. For you guys, I read a very violent scene, right? And this is sort of my most magical, most fun scene, because I love to imitate the dolphins and the sea lions. But writing 4 books, I could try all sorts of different. I wrote poems, I wrote songs, I did battle scenes where it clipped in montage from one character to the next by paragraph. Yeah, so that was fun. Okay, so guys, you've been a lovely audience. I appreciate your time on a beautiful Saturday, and it's been great to meet you. I wish you good luck with your school year and your writing or wherever your creativity takes you. And thanks for spending some of the day with me.
Thank you so much for coming.
Yeah, thank you so much, Sarah.
so
This was
much.
wonderful.
This was great.
Wow.
Okay,
Great to see you again.
bye.
Thank you so much.
Take care.